In reading the Bacchae, I'd like to reach into two of our tools in our toolbox. Myth and ritual, first of all, we already mentioned that the story pretty obviously lends itself to a myth and ritual kind of analysis. We have a story of a God who's telling us what rites he likes. He tells us how he wants to be worshipped. We see the consequences of not worshiping that God. And the myth can be looked at as a large story that is there to tell the background behind ritual behaviors that you and I might find strange. Why is it that we're out in the hillside? Why is it that we run around and try to rip up prey with our own hands and then eat it raw? Why is it that we get so crazily drunk? Well, this story gives us a narrative background that helps fill in the reasoning behind all of these pieces. That narrative is what a myth and ritualist claims is what myth actually is. Myths are made up in order to give an explanation to ritual behaviors whose normal, sensible qualities don't really seem apparent to us as we're doing them, so we make up a myth in order to try to explain why it is we do those kind of things. Now, another reading that I would just want to pull out and make sure we had a chance to go at is a functionalist reading. Pulling out that functionalist tool and tinkering with the myth a bit, we might try to get a sense of what kind of social or cultural norm this myth is upholding. Now, when we start off trying to understand this question, keep in mind what we said when we first treated of Dionysus's ritual activity. It seems pretty clear that with Dionysus we have a set of rituals that is built on an upheaval of social norms and customs. So how could we talk about a functionalist reading if the very celebration that's being talked about here in Dionysus is purposefully built in order to overturn normal social structures? Recapping this, Dionysus's cult is built on gender bending. We've got here a story about Pentheus taking on the gender of a female and being inserted into a ritual. This mirrors an aspect of Dionysian rites where it is actually women who are in control of the ritual. They are understood to be the key figures among the Maenads. Men can perform in the rites, but it's women who have the most powerful role there. This is thought to be very much an inversion in antiquity. There is drinking to excess. This is more than what's normally there. The raw and the cooked here get inverted, so the raw meat is what we eat now. Young and old get all mixed up together. Remember how Tiresias and Cadmus themselves are putting on leopard skins and getting ready to go out and have a good time in this Dionysian worship. Social differences are obliterated. Just everyone is up in a drunken frenzy up on a hillside. There is a loss of control of reproduction, interestingly. Sex is engaged in Dionysiac ritual for orgiastic pleasure, not having to do with strict strictures over which women can have sex with which men. We saw in Hesiod's Theogony that was something of great anxiety and interest to Greek male principles, that they were trying to control the female powers of reproduction. Here, those powers linked with erotic desire are just gone, let free to run rampant. Pentheus's very palace collapse. So talking about the destruction of a social order, well, we see this dramatized in the play. The revolutionary power then of Dionysian ritual is strongly apparent to us. But let's just say that that's on the one hand, and now let's try to take a look at a possible other side to this revolutionary spirit built into Dionysian ritual. First, we would just remember and remind ourselves that Tiresias and Cadmus are old and powerful men. They basically represent a kind of establishment kind of thinking. So when Tiresias and Cadmus endorse these rituals, well then gosh, it's probably okay for everyone to be involved, and probably everybody should do it. It's hardly, in other words, some kind of revolutionary thing if these old graybeards are saying this is good for us, this is good for the city, we should do it. Following the gods is a good thing. This is a message that they keep putting across. Submit, in other words, to the authority of the gods. Another message that's built into these rites is that one should follow the jump on the bandwagon and follow the crowd. Being out of step with what everyone else is doing is not a good idea. Typically, things that are truly revolutionary expect that people should be out of step with some large group current. The point that is built into this impulse to follow the crowd and jump on the bandwagon is the point of respect and submitting to the gods. You should respect your elders and submit to the gods. And remember what happens to Pentheus for resisting this social norm. The idea that you should get on the bandwagon and follow along. Awful things happen to him. The play is a punishment for someone who resists the broader social currents authorized by Tiresias and Dionysus. So these features make us wonder to ourselves, well, wait a minute, why is this Dionysian worship, why should it be considered revolutionary when the whole point of the play is you should worship the gods, do what your elders tell you, and follow what everyone else is doing? It's an interesting thing. What kind of social norm is the Dionysian cult then upholding? Remember, if we're going to do a functionalist reading, we have to point to some social norm that the myth is endorsing, that it's underwriting and upholding. Suggestion. I'll just make a suggestion here. There'll be others. I hope that you all jump into the discussion forums and come up with your own. But my sense is that what's being endorsed here is the social norm of producing a space where it's okay to violate normal social practice. You produce a space where something convoluted is allowed to happen. There are examples of this that are common in religious calendars across many different cultures. I'll just take one example. In the Christian calendar, 40 days before Lent is supposed to arrive, there is a customary time known as Mardi Gras, celebrated in New Orleans in the United States and other places around the world, where strict Catholics who will be enforced in a period of abstention from some kind of pleasures during those 40 days of Lent will go overboard and engage in all kinds of slightly bending the rules kinds of behaviors. This is, while maybe not authorized by the highest officials in the church, it's surely tolerated, and at the local level is pretty much probably encouraged. We have then an area in which the powers that be circumscribe and say it's okay in this area to blow off some steam. Subversive behavior is welcomed, but only in this quarantine spot. In the case of what happens with the Dionysian rites, it is hard to say, well, we made this point when we were talking about the rites in the first place, it's hard to say that anything in Dionysus is anti-Olympian. Dionysus, sure, he has these kind of aspects of him that are a little strange, a little bit out of step. There are myths about him as just kind of arriving on the scene, but those don't make him any different than, remember the Homeric hymn to Demeter, or the Homeric hymn to Apollo. These gods, Olympian gods, just kind of arrive and they have to find their place. Dionysus is in that tradition and therefore quite traditional in the Olympian pantheon. The point then that each of these gods has their own way of being worshipped, and even when one of those ways of being worshipped is a little different than what the others are, the larger point with Dionysian worship is that you owe respect to the gods. You should give the gods their ritual due. Now, that's hardly a revolutionary message, is it? So the larger sense I think that the Dionysian story is giving us is that you resist the Olympians to your peril. Look what happens to poor Pentheus. There's also another kind of cautionary note that jumps in here too. With Dionysian worship, you should also be a little bit careful. Like, watch out. This authorized space in which norms can be violated, you should be a little bit on alert, because there's always going to be a next day when you're going to wake up and have to pay the price, whether that's a hangover from way too much wine or something much worse in the case of agave. The story does definitely underwrite for us the idea that, yes, go ahead and blow off steam, but be a little bit careful when you're doing it. Pulling back just a second and looking at the plays themselves, recall that what we're seeing here, the great tragedies that are performed at Athens, are being performed in a grand Dionysian festival. Dionysus is the patron god of these plays. So in order to show full and proper respect for Dionysus through this tragic performance, it's very much, the tragic performance of the Bacchae is very much built into this larger set of Athenian-based respect-paying to Dionysus. So it is hardly a matter of a few people thumbing their noses at authority, some crazed younger ones going berserk or anything like that. This is a performance set in the space of Dionysus in the city of Athens in order for us all to understand more fully our civic engagement and proper kinds of ritual behaviors. So I would suggest, according to a functionalist reading, despite the spaces in which it gets complex on the one hand, on the other hand, the larger message is worship the Olympian divinities. They like to get worshipped. Show respect for your elders. Show respect for the customs of the day. So the functionalist message of showing proper respect for the divinities gets fully endorsed and underwritten through even this strange cousin of ours, Dionysus, who's always been a member of our family, we Olympians, and has his own ways of doing things. But even though some of his ways are different than ours, all of us demand your respect, human beings. So I think that's the message that we're going to get from a functionalist standpoint in the Bacchae.